Hello, my name is Dottie Kweiglachiru and I'm coming to you from Talk to Dot. At Talk to Dot, I try to create awareness about domestic violence and domestic abuse. What I do is share the light on what you need to look out for so you don't find yourself going into or falling in love with a potentially abusive person. We call them red flags. If you know the red flags, you know what to avoid and what to run away from. Trust me, abusive people cannot be fixed. It's not your job to fix them. Secondly, what I do is I create light on what your relationship is. Some people live in an abusive relationship and they don't know, but they're going through hell and just thinking, this is not normal. So the next thing I do is to share light on that. So if you find out that you're being abused, you take a decision. I'm going to leave. I also help you leave. Because leaving is not just, I'm tired, I'm going to leave. There is a process. If you don't follow the process, you might mash things up for yourself. And sometimes it doesn't end really well. The fourth category I deal with are people who have left an abusive relationship. They struggle with trauma bonding. They struggle with going no contact. They struggle with getting their life back, depression, anxiety, CPTSD. What I do is to guide them through a path of healing, to guide them to reclaiming their life back, to guide them to rediscovering themselves, to their rebirth, so to say. Today, I'm quite excited because I'm interviewing someone who is dear to my heart. She's a friend, she's a mentor, she's a colleague, she's everything. She's a business coach and all. Her name is Yvonne. She is so knowledgeable about domestic abuse and domestic violence. And I'm so glad to have her here with me today, to be interviewing her today. And let us hear about what domestic abuse is from her point of view. Yvonne, can you just give us a quick introduction of who you are?
Hi, I'm Yvonne Egbuna, founder of NECA Professional Development. I'm a coach and I work with women and men to get rid of the word impossible because I don't believe there's such a word. I do this by enabling my clients to create those internal structures that they need for their growth and development. At the end of my sessions, clients always experience freedom from blocks and limiting beliefs. Thank you for having me on this program.
Right. The thing that people need to understand is when you stay in an abusive relationship, potentially certain things might happen to you, to your health, to your life, to your mental health and well-being, all of that stuff. What are the impacts potentially of remaining in an abusive relationship, in a violent relationship, non-violent relationship, whatever one define themselves? What is the impact? What are some of the impacts of staying in such a relationship?
Impacts of staying in an abusive situation. There's a lot of impact on all negative. There's a loss of self-esteem. There's a loss of your identity. So you start to lose your identity of who you are as a person, as an individual. There also could be lack of confidence. So even if you were once a really confident person, you find yourself just lacking the confidence to do things that normally you should be able to do. The other impact is usually in abusive situations, your relationships with people suffer. So a lot of people that have gone through abuse have often said that their abusers always try to isolate them from their friends and family, the network. So your relationships with the outside world really reduces. One other impact I can think of straight away from remaining in an abusive situation is your ability to achieve. So like some people are they're really driven, very ambitious, they are very talented people, but because they've found themselves entangled in an abusive relationship, all of the things that they could have been doing, they can't get to doing. It's a really negative cycle. It keeps you kind of suppressed and oppressed, such that your talent is not able to come out. There's many more impacts of remaining in an abusive relationship. That's just a few.
So, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Really helpful. And I hope that people are listening because this is not coming from me. It's coming from someone else who knows the subject area very well. Obviously, you find her links on the bottom, and there I will also post links to some of my playlists that talk about in more details some of the subject areas that we're touching at the moment. a question I want to ask is, there are people that have found themselves in abusive relationships and they have children and they think, oh, maybe I just stay because of the children. I don't want to be a single mother. I don't want to be a single father. I need to stay because children need a father and a mother to grow up. I don't want to split it. I don't want to split the family. Should a person stay because of the kids? What do you think? What are your thoughts about that?
Should you remain in a domestic abusive situation because of the children? No, no, no. In fact, you should leave an abusive situation because of the children.
Honestly, I am so thankful for your response because I cannot emphasize this enough. You should never stay in an abusive relationship because of the children. You should leave. In fact, you should flee. You should flee an abusive relationship because of the children. All right? You should flee because of the children. Now that we've established that you should not stay in an abusive relationship because of the children, Yvonne, what how do I phrase this now? How does domestic abuse or how does staying in an abusive relationship impact on the children? Because obviously they're the silent watchers, they're the silent participants in an abusive relationship. They exist there, they didn't have to be there, but they're in it and they are there. How does that environment, that abusive environment, how does it affect children? Tell us, please.
What's the impact of domestic violence on kids? Everything that we identified as impact on the abused adult is the same for the kids. So kids get to experience the fear, they lose their confidence, they also have experienced a loss of identity, they don't know who they are anymore. They go through really dark periods of, they could even end up being depressed, very sad, feeling like it's their fault all the time. I think for all the impacts that we've identified, the biggest one for me is the potential that the kids have of actually growing up to become abusers themselves and therefore propagating the cycle of abuse.
Now, one of the things that comes up, and there's stats about this and there's stories about this and there's all of that stuff is when people leave an abusive relationship, how safe is it? Is it unsafe? Is it really unsafe to leave? Because, I don't know, like you leave an abusive relationship, you've left the troubles there. You left the troubles, you've left a troubled person and you've moved on with your life. Is it unsafe to leave an abusive relationship?
Is it unsafe to leave? Yes and no. So there are records, there's statistics of people who have left abusive situations or abusive relationships and have got killed shortly after. But the statistics of those who have been killed within the abusive relationship is actually more than those who have been killed after leaving. So I think it's a case of it could go either way. There are lots of resources out there, and there are lots of organizations that help people who are going through abusive or trying to leave abusive situations. There are lots of organizations that help them, help to keep them safe. So I would recommend that.
Now, this is a very interesting and a very tricky one. So we have people that leave an abusive relationship. They leave, and everybody's like, "Hooray, she left!" Or "Hooray, he left!" And then a couple of weeks later, a couple of months later, a couple of years later, they go back to the abuse. Why do people go back to abusive relationship? I mean, they made it out. Why do they keep going back?
So people sometimes escape abusive relationships and then still find themselves going back to those relationships. And I think the reason for this is something called trauma bonding. So we'll need a whole episode to talk about that. But in simple terms, is simply when you're so connected to your abuser that even when you leave your abuser, you start to feel like you're incomplete. And even when you start to rebuild your life again, it feels like you're missing something because you're already so used to abuse. So anything that is not abuse feels very alien to you. There's a whole study of trauma bonding out there, which, if this is something that you find yourself in, it's best to study and maybe see a psychologist or a therapist, and they can help you walk through that situation.
Now, this is you. This is you speaking to the people watching you and trying to learn from you, and even everyone watching. What advice would you give to a person going into a relationship? Because people want to be in a relationship, they want to be in love, they want to be together, and it is amazing to find yourself in a good relationship, to be in love, and to be with someone.
So, advice for people before you go into a relationship: just make sure that you have done a fair amount of work on yourself, and you've kind of come into your own, and you know exactly who you are, what you want, what you're about. You need to be able to establish, I think it's really important to establish a fair sense of self before you go into a relationship. Is so important. Can't overemphasize. A lot of us go into relationships without, first of all, knowing who we are and what we stand for, our values, what we want from life, what we want from our partners, that sort of thing.
Another question: what advice would you give to a person who is living in domestic violence? What would you say to the person?
For those people who are, unfortunately and sadly, have found themselves in abusive relationships or marriages, the only advice I'll have for you is to leave. That's the only thing I can say. It's not worth it. Just leave. There is a difference between a good relationship and a bad relationship, and this is how I like to classify it. So there is no perfect relationship. We know that because there are no perfect human beings. Having said that, a good relationship is one where both parties can grow, respect each other, listen to each other, and are not afraid to be themselves with each other. So even when the problems come and the challenges come, both parties can work together to help that relationship thrive. That's a good relationship. A bad relationship or an abusive relationship, it won't happen. It would not work. So my advice would be to leave.
Finally, what advice would you give to a person who's come out and feeling deflated, who's feeling like, oh, my life is over, I can't cope, I can't do this anymore, they just feel empty? What advice would you give to them? Is there hope, really?
My advice to people who have left abusive relationships and feel a little bit deflated is to be kind to yourself. It's a normal feeling, it's a normal emotion. There is bound to be that sense of defeat and deflation, but be kind to yourself and give yourself time to heal. You will come out stronger in the end, and you'll be so grateful that you left.
Yvonne, I cannot honestly thank you for your comments, for coming on board this interview, for sharing your knowledge and your light.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your program, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
People, this is Yvonne. Like I told you at the beginning, she's going to be an amazing person to listen to. She knows her stuff. She knows her ins and outs of domestic violence. Thank you, Yvonne, for coming on board. So glad to have you here. We will post your details in the description below. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Talk to Dot. If you are in an abusive relationship, know that it is not your fault and you are not alone. Please talk to someone. If you have no one else to talk to, please talk to Dot. One love, peace, guidance, and respect.